Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's Offroad Update. After 8 of 13 rounds complete in the 2025 Grand National Cross Country season, the championship points were being led by the 2024 XC2 champion Grant Davis. 1 point behind in the standings was the 2021 national champion Ben Kelly. With the summer break fast approaching, the riders were left with one more opportunity to control the momentum and the conversation for the next 2 months. As the riders crossed the finish line at the toughest race of the year, there was more than one talking point established for the summer. Round 9 of the season took place at the Snowshoe Ski Resort in West Virginia. Paying homage to the original GNCC, the Blackwater 100, the riders started on the asphalt of Snowshoe Drive before heading off into the rocks and woods that awaited them. When the green flag went up, the top 20 overall riders in points were the first to take off. Grant Davis would lead Cody Barnes, Gus Reardon, Stu Baylor, and Ben Kelly out of view of the fans on row 1. Row 2 would be led by Mike Wachowski, followed by Liam Draper, Craig DeLong, Caleb Russell, and Josh Toth. Row 3 was Josh Strang, Nick DeFeo, Jordan Ashburn, JoJo Cunningham, and Ricky Russell. Row 4 was Gavin Simon, Chase Landers, and Brody Johnson. Behind them came the rest of the XC1 and XC2 riders with names like Thad Duvall, Jesse Ansley, Grant Baylor, Jack Walker, Toby Cleveland, Hunter Bush, and Dakota DeVore. Five miles into the opening lap, and it was the Enduro engineering triumph of Ricky Russell emerging with the lead, starting back on row 3 in the field. Behind him came Phoenix Honda's Cody Barnes, Grant Davis, Stu Baylor, and Liam Draper in 5th. Gus Reardon was 6th ahead of Jordan Ashburn and Josh Toth, with Nick DeFeo, Caleb Russell, and Josh Strang rounding out the top 10. 11 through 15 came Craig DeLong, Wachowski, Ben Kelly, Grant Baylor, and Brody Johnson. Thad Duvall would lead the last 5 of the top 20 ahead of Cunningham, Simon, Cleveland, Walker, and Ansley. A handful of miles later at the Powerline Hill Climb, the Washington native Russell still controlled the point position. Davis, the overall points leader, ran in spot number 2, the front duo pulling out a slight gap over the rest of the field. Stu Baylor was next ahead of Barnes, while Ashburn, who started on row 3 with Russell, rounded out the top 5. Draper came into view in 6th, while Reardon, with a handful of throttle and momentum, would make the pass going up the second part of the climb. DeFeo and Toth on their Kawasaki's were next as Strang on the factory Beta still rounded out the top 10, with Kelly hard on the gas behind him, making up for a mistake at Howard's Hole early into the lap. Grant Baylor was next ahead of DeLong as Wachowski and Duvall clicked off the top 15 riders. Johnson and Caleb Russell were next in the order, while Ricky Russell came back down the hill after the brief run through the pro pits. Lane Whitmer, who started back on row 12, moved all the way to 17th physically on track, leading the 258 class ahead of Chase Landers and Hunter Smith, while Cunningham ran 4th and 20th on track ahead of XC2 riders Jack Walker and Toby Cleveland. Six miles into lap 2, and it was still the Russell and Davis tandem out front. Davis had started on row 1 while Russell started on row 2. On time adjustment, the Triumph rider had additional time on his side on top of the 2 seconds physically ahead of Davis on track. Baylor still ran third ahead of Flat Rock Motor Club Gas rider Ashburn, with Barnes rounding out the top 5, running second in XC2. Ben Kelly, after completing the first lap outside the top 10, moved all the way into 6th spot on track. Draper, in his first snowshoe aboard a 450, ran 7th ahead of Reardon, with Toth following the Australian rider. Fellow Australian Strang still rounded out the top 10 in the order ahead of Nick DeFeo. Grant Baylor chased his rookie teammate ahead of DeLong, Wachowski, Duvall, and Brody Johnson. Caleb Russell ran in 17th as the battle for the 250A class lead continued between Whitmer and Smith, while Rocker rounded out the top 20 on his beta ahead of third in the 250A class, Cunningham. Four miles later, and the running order shifted significantly. Davis emerged with the lead, dropping Russell to second, however still carrying time advantage on his side. Ashburn made the pass on Baylor to move into third, dropping Baylor down to fourth. Barnes on his Honda ran a lonely fifth, while Kelly still ran sixth, but on the gas. Toth and Reardon were in a battle for third in XC2 while running 7th and 8th on track ahead of Strang. Rounding out the top 10 was Liam Draper and Grant Baylor, the South Carolina native keeping his Kawasaki throttle locked behind the Yamaha rider, not happy with something that happened out on course. Round 1 winner DeFeo led the back end of the top 20 ahead of 2023 champion DeLong aboard his Rockstar Husqvarna. Honda's Wachowski ran 13th ahead of West Virginia native Duvall, while Brody Johnson rounded out the top 15, running 6th in XC2. Whitmer ran next ahead of Caleb Russell, while Hunter Smith followed the 7-time snowshoe winner. Walker, the lone two-stroke in the pro ranks, came through next, as Cole Whitmer from Open A, starting on row 15, rounded out the top 20, ahead of Cunningham and XC3 125 leader Jonathan Johnson. Back to the 5-mile mark on lap 3, and Ricky Russell had regained the physical lead on track, with Davis still holding down the runner-up position. Jordan Ashburn, regarded as one of the favorites heading into the weekend, ran third in the order, while Stu Baylor came through just ahead of Kelly, who had moved into the top 5. Barnes came through in 6th, but before he left the range of the camera, was passed by a hard-charging Josh Toth. Grant Baylor was 8th, while Strang and Liam Draper rounded out the top 10. DeFeo ran 11th, with DeLong following from behind. Wachowski still ran ahead of Duvall, with Johnson on his privateer Honda still in the mix. Lane Whitmer was still leading 250A, but decided to shoulder check a tree just for good measure. Hunter Smith chased him in the 250A class as Walker ran 18th in the order. Caleb Russell and JoJo Cunningham would round out the top 20. When the riders entered the pits, the running order had changed dramatically. Off camera at the 7.5-mile mark, the toughest spot on the course, riders were strewn all over the rock, trying to get through. As the riders checked in, it was Josh Toth coming through with the first place position, with a good gap over the rest of the field. XC1 teammate Stu Baylor ran second, now leading the XC1 Pro class. Ricky Russell at the end of the pit lane entered third, but was passed by Grant Davis, Jordan Ashburn, and Ben Kelly, whose pit areas were earlier in the row. Russell would re-enter the race in 6th. Grant Baylor was 7th as Cody Barnes dropped all the way to 8th. Strang entered his pit in 9th, but was passed by Johnson. Strang would take off just ahead of Draper and Reardon. DeLong, meanwhile, pulled in to change his rear wheel as the tire he started the race with was worn down due to the rocky conditions. During the stop, DeFeo, who was having issues after his pit stop, and Wachowski would pass the Pennsylvania rider. In just 42 seconds from start to finish, however, DeLong was back underway. Lane Whitmer entered his pit still leading 250A, while Walker would make the pass as he pitted at the end of lap 2. Hunter Smith, running the second in the 250A, entered his pit just after a hard crash. A rear wheel swap later, the Texas rider resumed his race just ahead of Cole Whitmer. Jonathan Johnson and Cunningham would make the pass on Smith during the pit stop. Just before the pits on lap 4, it was still Toth leading the way. The first rider to win an overall from XC2 had a hot and cold start to 2025, but Snowshoe had always treated the New England rider well. Stu Baylor ran second on track, while moving up to third was Kelly as Ashburn chased him. Time advantage on his side from starting 2 rows behind the KTM rider. Grant Baylor rounded out the top 5 on his Team Green Kawasaki, while Barnes made passes on his Honda, moving into 6th. Russell on his Triumph ran 7th, while the points leader Davis came through back in 8th. Strang ran 9th, while Johnson rounded out the top 10, running 4th in XC2. DeLong and Wachowski were next, just ahead of Reardon. DeFeo and Draper would round out the top 15 in the order. A few miles into the final lap of racing, and it was Toth still in the lead position on track, with time adjustment on his side. Baylor still ran second, but was hard on the charge to catch his XC2 teammates. Kelly still ran third, several spots ahead of championship rival Davis in the order. Ashburn still ran 4th, while Barnes made up more passes, rounding out the top 5. Grant Baylor was 6th as plastic flopped on his motorcycle, while Strang matched his race number in the running order. Johnson, DeFeo, and DeLong would round out the top 10 ahead of Davis and Wachowski. As the lead duo were within 2 miles of the finish, the battle was on. Baylor had caught Toth as the rear tire on the Connecticut native was completely worn down. Baylor, however, would fall over, handing the lead back to Toth. Stu would catch him again and make the pass, but needed 8 seconds advantage across the line to take the win. As the checkered flag fell, Stu Baylor would cross the line to take the XC1 win. Just seconds behind came Toth, capturing his first XC2 win of the year. When timing refreshed, just 3 seconds was the difference. Josh Toth wins his second career overall victory. Stu Baylor took second overall, giving the Red Bear team a 1-2 finish on the day. Ben Kelly would come through to take the final spot on the podium and second in XC1. Jordan Ashburn would round out the XC1 podium, finishing 4th overall for the afternoon. Cody Barnes would come through the finish to take second in XC2, just ahead of Grant Baylor. Time adjustment was in the favor of the younger Baylor, though, and the overall positions would change, giving Baylor 5th and Barnes 6th for the day. Josh Strang would round out the top 5 in XC1, 7th overall in the afternoon. Brody Johnson came through to take his first ever XC2 podium, 8th overall for the race. Nick DeFeo and Craig DeLong would round out the top 10, while points leader Grant Davis finished 11th overall, 5th in XC2.
Man, we got ourselves a snowboard.
Fuck yeah.
Well, we talked off camera before the race about just doing what you just did and getting that overall, and man, it came to fruition. And you had to fight for it, and there towards the end, the rear tire was coming apart. But man, you survived, and you held on by the skin of your teeth, but you got it done, and especially at Snowshoe, where you've had good success here in the past.
Yeah, no, I've been so close to the overall here. I've been second a couple of times, and I almost let that one slip up again. You know, I was just trying to manage that tire, and I couldn't slow down enough to really see what was happening if the knobs were gone. And there was actually some left, but I'm glad I managed it, and yeah, I'm just smoked, honestly. That was super physical.
Talk about the track briefly. Obviously, there was Howard's Hole, and then that all the way down at the bottom at the 7. But that really determined how this race turned out today.
Yeah, no, for sure. Howard's Hole. Honestly, I went down there and watched the party yesterday, and didn't have any line picked out. I was like, I'll just figure it out. And yeah, when I got there, I just kind of went where I thought was the shortest route and made sense, and I made up so much time on those guys. So yeah, just being smart about it.
Hey, I just remembered over all the years, since I was with you for a lot of the years on different teams and whatnot, but every time in the past when you've won XC2 here at Snowshoe, you've been on the overall podium, you've been second, and it was your teammate that won it. Well, you won XC2 again, but this time you won the overall, and it's your teammate that's in second from XC1.
Yep, wasn't going to let it happen again, that's for sure, man.
Great ride today, man.
Thank you.
As the series takes a traditional 2-month summer break, the overall points chase shifted dramatically. Ben Kelly now holds a 7-point advantage over Grant Davis for the championship lead. Gus Reardon, after a 13th place finish at Snowshoe, still holds on to third in the standings, with Stu Baylor and Cody Barnes rounding out the top 5. Liam Draper runs 6th, while Toth, after his overall win, leapfrogs from 10th all the way to 7th in the order. Caleb Russell, Craig DeLong, and Mike Wachowski round out the top 10 in the championship standings. Thank you for watching, everyone. Round 10 of the 2025 GNCC season resumes after the 2-month summer break, September 6th and 7th in Newburgh, West Virginia, for the Buckwheat 100 GNCC. I'll see you guys there.
Stu Baylor and Ben Kelly, 1, 2, and 3. That's what it's all about.